So first, the traditional owners of the land that we're gathering on this evening, the Turrbal and Jagera people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that we are on unceded land. So tonight we will hear from a panel, which you can see in front of us. Panel people who knew and supported Bryan through his journey of telling his story. So leading the panel will be Chris Olsen, acclaimed author of Shell and Boy Lost, that told the story of her own brother's experiences in and out of home care. And joining Chris will be Karen Walsh, CEO of Micro Projects, a Brisbane not-for-profit organisation. And Karen, you got heckles. Really? I'll keep going. Katie Maguire, Programs Resource Officer at Lotus Place. And Edwina Shaw. We're getting excited now. Edwina is the author of Thrill Seekers and a Guide Through Grief, and as I'm sure all of you are and the scribe of Bryan's book, Hartas. So a little bit of housekeeping. Please set your phones to silence, or could you please turn them off if you would like to tweet. Anyone still tweets? The Twitter was contradiction. The Twitter handle is @Avid Reader 4101. The bathrooms are just through here. If you walk through, just head towards the light. I know that sounds a bit sinister, but it will work. You will see what I mean if you need to use the bathroom. You will have noticed we have a bar that was open before. It will be open after the event as well. And also the organisers of tonight have kindly provided some delicious food as well. So make sure you go to the bar and grab some food after the event. If you haven't already, I encourage you to purchase a copy of Hartas, which is for sale at the counter, as demonstrated here. You also get, for tonight only, a bonus feature. This book here, you get this as a free add-on, Unexpected Forces, an anthology of short pieces from Forgotten Australia. It's really beautiful little extra publication. And so without any further ado, I would just like to hand over to Chris, and we're going to begin tonight's little adventure. So would you please put your hands together for Chris?
Hello, everyone. And welcome to all of you. There's lots of familiar faces in the audience, friends from Colorado and October. It's great to see you all. My name is Christina Olsen. I'm a writer here in the Nation. I want to begin really by acknowledging especially Forgotten Australian audience. And your you're here to honour Bryan, as we all are. Thank you very, very much for coming. Yes, it's okay. Where I'd also like to especially welcome Bryan's son, Michael, especially thank you. I'm sorry, we're all here tonight to launch a very special book into the world. Into lots of book launches this year, but this one is probably for me the most special. By Bryan Hartas. And as chair, it's my privilege and pleasure to navigate us through the incredible life of Bryan tonight. But before we begin properly, I'd like to ask Gloria to have a special acknowledgement. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm being asked to read this little piece. Thank you. Okay. We acknowledge all forgotten Australians, care leavers, past and present, for their pain, resilience, activism, and advocacy. Childhood should bring up images of innocence, joy, optimism, and wonder. It should be a time of security where children feel protected and loved. This was not a reality for forgotten Australians. Care leaders, we will never forget the pain that can move forward with a degree of peace when our history and experience are recognised and acknowledged. Thank you.
Cheryl Munson was to be on the panel as well, and unfortunately she can't make it today, but I'm sure she'd love to be here to share stories of her friendship, long-term friendship with Bryan. So yeah, she's very sorry she can't be here.
Thanks, David. Apart from all of you who I know have very personal connections with forgotten Australians, I have one too. Well, a couple actually. I work with people at my Neerkol place years ago now. I think it wasn't in a life, but so long ago, including Bryan. First in a writing project organised by Karen Walsh, which was very exciting. Then my daughter Zoe, who's an actor, produced a theatre project with forgotten Australians. The same group, I think, and again through Micah. And it premiered at the Powerhouse in New Farm, which was incredibly exciting for all of us. But I guess the most personal connection I have is to my own brother Peter, the boy lost at the heart of the book of that name, and more recently of the play of that name that's just wrapped up at Queensland Theatre. My big brother, thank you. It's an incredibly emotional journey, no matter how you guys know this better than I do, no matter how often you talk the story, it's still there in your body, isn't it? Yeah, my big brother was stolen forcibly from my mother's arms as a baby by a very violent husband. And she didn't see him again until he found her 36 years later. But in the meantime, he contracted polio, lived in violent and inhumane institutions, and was repeatedly abused in state care and by his father. His health and education and dignity were all removed from him. We like to think, though, that he got a happy ending. He found our mother and he found us. But as many of you know, that doesn't imply he was fixed or mended. Peter lives with a fallout of still now. He's doing pretty well, and he'd probably like you all to know that. He describes himself as lucky. I don't think it's a word used easily about Bryan, or that Bryan would have used that word. Perhaps he might have. I think in his enduring humanity, which I remember vividly, and his sense of the world, his ability to see the best in people, but he probably did at some parts of his life think he was lucky. I hope that you know that. Okay, so it's my job. Old journo and me, I've got to interview these people up here. I've still got the skills. Karen, I'm going to throw to you first. Bryan always said that his life changed, finally and the best, when he came to Micah and to Lotus Place. Can you talk a little bit about Micah first, in general, for those people here who may not know about it, and its work with Forgotten Australia?
Micah is a not-for-profit, and we started at St Mary's community in South Brisbane, and in that process we met many survivors of child abuse in institutional care, and Bryan was one of the first pre-2005 that Lotus was created, and him and Alan, who's here tonight, and many other people wanted to break the silence about abuse in institutions and the Catholic Church and the government. Is that okay? Yeah, yes. So we met and we heard a lot of the experiences of people, and people joined together to really amplify each other's experience. And I suppose Forgotten Australians became a term after the federal government ran a Senate Affairs Committee in which we organised many people in Queensland to participate, to tell their stories, as well as Carolyn's down there from Melbourne and people in New South Wales. And there weren't very many groups at all that had gathered people who had been in out-of-home care. But Brisbane, we had a board inquiry, so that was in 1999. And it wasn't long after that that I first met Bryan. And I suppose in those days he was like everyone, like Alan told me, he'd take me down a dark alley and fix me up if I didn't do what he wanted me to. And the arguments of the when we had meetings, I'm never forget a meeting at Mount Gravatt, what was it called, the showgrounds, and I literally was sitting under a table because people were yelling at each other so much, and I thought, what the hell have I got myself into here? But their story, you could hear the pain and you could hear the frustration of not being heard and listened to. And I think that if anything changes for people, it's just that, listening, being heard, being listened to, but also meeting each other. And that's not a straightforward process either. And I think Lotus Place, which happened many years later in 2000, and we changed the name. It used to be called the Esther Centre, and people basically chose the metaphor of a lotus flower. And Bryan, I remember, was in that process of, you know, how do you come from muddy waters to recovery and find yourself and find your own truth and, you know, survive, acknowledge your beauty and survival. So the lotus symbol became the name of the service. And what Queensland were very passionate about was that it be a drop-in centre and it be a resource for people, so that if people walked in, they would know that people knew their history. And over the years, I think one of the great things has been the creative arts, the linking with people who've been so generous, because we haven't always had funding for it. But Edwina and Katie and you know, Chris did a small project. What do we call that? Lives of Uncommon Children. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Which was great. There's been a couple of plays, and I think that basically the role of the creative arts in healing is something that we can't underestimate. And I know Bryan really always had this dream of writing a book, and the fact you enabled that to happen was amazing. And it's all there for us to read now.
Karen, when did you realise that Bryan's story was really important, and in fact it was emblematic of thousands of other stories?
Not from day one. I mean, you don't listen to anyone's story and not know it's important. And I suppose the realisation that this wasn't just an individual story, that I met people in all kinds of places and heard their stories and realised there was a theme. The church, the secrecy of the church and the cover up of the church, that people had gone to bishops and to other people. And I suppose in Australia, it's the politicians who really showed the leadership. They might not have done what everyone wants them to have done, but they did listen, and they have documented, and it is in Australian history and in Parliament what did occur. And all these reports have categorically said that abuse of children did occur, cover up did occur. And in the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses into Childhood Sexual Abuse, it was very clear the evidence was there that probably hadn't been at other inquiries. Like Senate inquiries, more a narrative. The Royal Commission was actually investigative, and it showed quite clearly that these abuses did occur. It wasn't people's imagination, people hadn't joined together. And you know, so you now, so many have written a book. Like, there are many books you can read that show just how important. Everyone's story is unique. Why they were there was unique in the first place. But their experience of abuse, neglect and abuse of power were the same.
Incredibly important that being heard and being listened to and heard, and for your story to be written down, spoken, put out there to be done. Yeah, did you see?
Like people in positions of power, like it was one thing for me to listen and Joe and everyone else to notice. Like we can all listen and value and respect, but I think our biggest job was to get them in front of prime ministers and premiers and bishops. Not that we were successful with bishops, but we did get them. We did get in front of a couple, but it never worked at all. And that was our biggest job, I feel, and I'm proud that we did that.
One of the things we're going to do tonight with every speaker is to hear a small reading from Bryan's book that goes with what people are saying. And I'm going to hand over to Ed for the first one from Bryan's book.
So I wanted to make sure that Bryan's voice was loud and clear. So I know. Glasses off time. Throw them away. So one of the experiences that Bryan had as a child, which is common to many forgotten Australians, is domestic violence in his own home. So here's just a little section from his book about that. There was so much trauma in that house that there are a lot of things I forget. Noel and I shared a room out on the veranda not far from Mum's. The other kids were out towards the lounge room. The baby was in with her. We would be asleep, but then we'd hear him come home making a hell of a racket, yelling and screaming at Mum. I'd lie in my bed wishing I could hit him and make him stop. The police came every now and then because of the violence in the house. We kids were in a corner room, all squashed in our beds, but we'd hear him fighting and arguing with Mum. So I won't read you any more of the trauma. I wanted to show you part of, for me, why I took on the job was because Bryan loved his mum so much. So I used to love sitting there on back steps, stars and scratching and the smell and smoke of mosquito coils. Every night after dinner, we used to sit with Mum and look at the stars. Quite often I'd see a flash and Mum would explain that it was a shooting star. Once I saw 2 in one night. We'd sit there for hours, my mum and me and my brothers, looking up at the stars, sparkling like diamonds in the sky. Beautiful. Mum would have a little one on her lap, but it didn't matter. We all felt loved. It was great to listen to her stories and watch the full moon come. Try and count the stars, Mum said. I didn't get too far. I'd cuddle in close under one of her arms and tell her my dreams. When I'm grown up, I'll buy you a big new house and a fancy car.
Hard to read, I know, when you're so emotionally involved with it. That first person testing is so powerful, and in his voice, there's nothing to replace that.
It was so important to him that it was in his voice. So that's why I just sat with him and wrote exactly what he said. I did steer him to remembering good bits.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Thank you, Ed. I'm going to flip to Katie now. Katie, Lotus Place. I mean, I think just about everyone in this room knows what Lotus Place is, but I want to hear it in your words.
That's Lotus Place is really a safe place for forgotten Australians, and a place where people can come and connect with other people who've had a similar lived experience, a common experience. Like Karen said, everyone has a individual story, unique story, but that people can come there and know that they don't have to explain themselves or why they might be a bit crinkled or troubled. Everyone understands, and I think there's more to it than that. Lotus Place is a place where people can actually get some help. When people have experienced trauma, they they tend to, childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences, they tend to have difficulty forming those relationships. So, and sometimes people don't get along that well, as Karen alluded to earlier. And I think we work to support people to have ways of connecting with each other. And one of those things is the creative program, giving people some way of connecting and understanding each other more deeply, and the wellbeing program helps them as well. But a lot of what makes Lotus Place strong is the experiences that people share with each other. It's we're just there creating a space and an atmosphere for people, their strengths to come through, and it's a peer-based program. So it's the interactions and connections that people have with us as the staff, but also with each other. And one of the things that I found really interesting, even at this stage when people have known each other for such a long time, when we were doing this project here with the unexpected forces, one of the comments that kept coming up for people in the creative writing project that we're doing is people are still learning about each other, still getting to know each other, even now, as we all do. Everyone in relationship, we keep getting to know each other, and that's still happening with the peer groups at Lotus Place. So we'd also do advocacy and support, and just generally getting on with things in life that can be very difficult for Australians as well.
Busy then. A little bit busy.
There's other things happening as well.
When did you first meet Bryan?
It's probably one of the first days that I started working at Lotus Place in 2013. Art group was already happening before I came along, and Bryan was a regular participant of art group, and Sam Isles and Nick Plowman were the teachers back then. And around that time, I think it was close to the time when he was doing his portrait, and when he started his portrait, and it was so important to him to get it right, and he was very careful, and he worked on that portrait for weeks and weeks. And that I remember that the importance and the care that he took with that painting.
So you've known him since you knew him since 2013. Did you see any changes in him? Well, since then.
I know that over the years, he talked about Jo Bennett quite a lot. Jo over there, who used to be part of Lotus Place before she went off to the Northern Territory to be with her grandchildren. Anyway, Bryan would always talk about how when he first started coming to Lotus, that he couldn't even walk on the footpath, that he'd walk on the road because he didn't feel comfortable walking on the footpath, and that it was Jo gave him strategies and things to say. And I should remember what the name is. I remember.
You are special, you are valuable, you are loved.
And so he would say that to himself so that he could feel okay to be on the footpath. Yeah. And so over the years, I think he just kept progressing because he he had a lot of anxiety, and over the years he was able to take less and less of his medication and be more present with people, and more confident in his art and his creative expression, and asking for what he wants and persisting. I mean, that's why his book exists, because he never gave up. It was beautiful the way he just kept saying it had to be in his voice. And I know other people tried to help him write the book, but I think Edwina was the right person at the right time. So
It was really important to him, wasn't it? That this book was written and in his voice, but that was actually recorded.
It was extremely important, and I remember when we did the What is Justice boxes, and Bryan created this. It was a project where everyone was invited to respond to the question, what is justice, inside a 20 centimetre by 20 centimetre timber box. And Bryan made a replica of his prison cell and wrote about how, which really surprised me, how wonderful the food was in Boggo Road. And I was like, the best food he ever had, because he starved to death at Westbrook. And that when he got to Boggo Road, he actually got fed. And that when he got released from Boggo Road, he committed a crime so he could have a meal. And it astounded me, and he wasn't making it up. It was factual. That's exactly how I felt, and that just amazed me and made me so sad at the same time. Just that was one of his most prized memories.
Can't read that, because that was another.
His eyes always lit up at the whenever he told me what he had in his first meal in jail. That afternoon I had tea, and it was the first proper meal I'd had since the Stewart's place. The Stewarts were a good family where he stayed for about 8 months to a year. T-bone steak with cooked potato and beans and mashed pumpkin and plenty of gravy with onion in it. I licked my plate clean. And then I got dessert, custard and jelly. I couldn't believe it. I was really rapt. You had to go and collect your meal, then take it to your cell. It came out in a big container, aluminium plates full of food, with the dessert plates under the main meal. We got cottage pie, rice pudding. It was beautiful. Every Sunday we got plum duff with custard. Wow. We had roast meat, roast potatoes and pumpkin, onions, peas, beans with plenty of gravy. For the first time in such a very long time, I was well fed. I was a skinny little short fellow when I was put in. Then I started to grow.
You don't like that anymore, right?
I don't think it's bad.
Very, very different. Because of course, he was being starved at the institutions he was at. I mean, Neerkol especially.
Yeah.
Neerkol takes up a big chunk of some of the sorrier parts of Bryan's story, and a lot of it is around it's not being fed for years on it, starvation.
Yeah. And there are photographs of Neerkol around that time when you can see that those kids are not being fed. So this is a little bit from Bryan again. In Neerkol, kids look like concentration camp survivors you see in those old photographs. Bones protruding. Yeah, you know, don't you, Alan? Knees, elbows, shoulders, all sticking out. Bony knees, eyes staring at nothing. There was plenty of food around on the Neerkol farm, but we weren't getting any of it. That was for the nuns and the brothers and priests. White-faced cattle, stacks of them. Pigs, chickens, milking cows. Lots of food, but none for us kids. I put it to the nuns years ago. They just shrugged and made excuses. We weren't there at the time. They baked bread on the premises, but we were lucky if we got a slice. In the mornings, we were fed what we kids called breakfast delight. A thick, sludgy porridge that locked your jaws together as you tried to chew. You could hardly get it off your spoon. No milk, no sugar. I was hungry. I'd eat anything. I don't remember seeing a sausage or a piece of meat the whole time I lived in Neerkol. I didn't see an egg. Dinner was supposed to be stew, but it was watered down gravy with oil on the top, a bit of gristle with a small chunk of pea or carrot, nothing in there. And this was the bit that was very telling to me. I'd get that little piece of gristle, suck it clean, and keep it in my pocket to chew on later.
Yep.
I was that hungry.
And the thing was too, that even after Neerkol, or when he was being farmed out to farms, he didn't get fed at those other occasional ones. Yeah, and it what occurred to me mostly in that was that it's not always about organizations. It's not always about institutions, but about individuals. That we all are responsible for this. We're all responsible for children. And that if there's starving out there, it's up to the people who are looking on, as well as the institutions who are. I think we've all got to remember that that our impulse is to step back and not be involved, but yeah, we're responsible too. Before I leave you, Kate, I just wanted to ask very quickly about the sorts of things that are useful. I hesitate to use the word treatments, but the sorts of activities, I guess, for healing the kind of trauma that Bryan had.
Well, I think that is a challenging question, because how does healing happen? I mean, I suppose it's about creating the conditions in which healing is possible, and then a whole lot of repeated experiences that reflect back to the person that they're okay, that they're cared for, that they matter, and that can happen through. I mean, like Karen was talking about, the creative programs give space for those kinds of interactions. Some people aren't into creativity though, and so it's about feeling like when people walk into a place that they're seeing. It's like what a lot of people who are homeless experience. They're invisible, and I think a lot of forgotten Australians have felt like that. So actually being seen and being heard, but also being able to contribute to change. To say that I've heard it said over and over again, and in that acknowledgement that Gloria read, it's the change that they see happening because of the work that advocacy they've done over the years, I think does contribute to healing. And also sometimes the healing the person doesn't experience it themselves, but their children are maybe spared a little from the intergenerational trauma that might occur. So through their healing, there's a better chance for their children. But sometimes that's not the case, and it's so distressing for people to see the pain that their children and grandchildren experience because of what's happened to them. So it's not there's no easy answers, and I think it takes a community to bring up a child, a village to bring up a child. I think it takes a village to heal trauma.
Yeah, but that pain, as I said to my mom last week, yes, the wounds are healed, but the scars are very visible and they run bloody deep.
Yeah, in your body.
Thanks, Alma.
Thank you. And I'm going to move to you now.
Okay.
You all know Edwina Shaw, scribe and editor of Hartas, and creative writing teacher at Lotus. Since when? For how long? 2017?
2016.
16.
I thought I was going, a friend rang me up the night before, Karen Anderson, the jazz singer. She said, I'm going to teach creative writing at Forgotten Australians tomorrow. Can you tell me what to do? I said, oh, it'll just be easier if I come and show you. Because I thought I didn't know what it was. I was teaching refugees. I thought it was refugees. And then once I met Forgotten Australians, I could not leave them. So, and I have loved it. It has enriched my life immeasurably. I love my gang, my writing gang. But so Bryan was in there, the first class, and he was sort of a cocky, loud lion of the group, wasn't he? And he told us lots of funny stories. He was obviously a very gifted storyteller and was always making up good stories and entertaining us all. And yeah, and he was a gentle, loving soul. And he told me, I think probably the first time I met him, he wanted somebody to write his book.
That was my next question about how the writing of the book came about, and I'm more interested in the process of getting it written.
So I would sit with him for an hour or two every week, and Bryan would tell me the story, and I would write it exactly as he spoke it by hand. I didn't figure out until later that it was probably better if I didn't straight into my laptop. But so that process happened over a few years. And then I said, okay, that's enough. And he said, no, there's more. There is always more, but I had to, even, when this last version was done, he was still saying, but there's more. There's all the rest of my life as well. But there's only so much you can. I told him we couldn't, it would be a set of encyclopedias if he got everything in. Since then, I have discovered there were a lot of things I wish he had told me that could have been included. But he was right. It wasn't all in there. But yeah, so we sat together and then I typed it all up and organized it into more or less chronological order. I also prompted him as we wrote so that it wasn't just sad stories. That's something we very much focus on in our creative writing classes, is finding the good things, finding the joy. So that he brought up a lot of lovely memories from his childhood with his mum and even, some sort of happy moments in, maybe not Neerkol, but in Boggo Road. Yeah. Yes.
And what was it like for Bryan to actually put down in words? I mean, I think, I'm just watching, the Playboy lost, lately I've sold through every session of everything I wrote the book, and even out in all those times. You've already been with him tonight, talking about Bryan.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly emotional. Was it emotional for
Bryan these days? Bryan was much tougher. I don't think I ever saw Bryan cry. So his love for his mother was obvious, and that was one of the great things that happened during the writing of the book, was that he got a photo of his mother, which he hadn't had in all that time. And this is
in the book?
yeah, and because she was just a young woman when she died, and Bryan was only 7, so it's very much the stories Bryan has told him himself from when he was 7, and that I suppose I really resonated with that little boy in him. Yeah.
And were there places he didn't want to go in memory?
Yeah, they were the places he didn't tell me about. He did, I think, the most traumatic aspects of his time in institutions and in foster homes he talked about, but some of what happened to him as an adult he didn't want to talk about.
I think you're going to do this another reading.
Yeah, I want to do the bit from Westbrook.
From Westbrook, yeah.
Yeah, so what happened to Bryan was, by the time he reached 14, Neerkol, the orphanage, didn't want him anymore. They didn't know what to do with him. He'd left the last place where he'd been fostered out because the abuse was so bad. And he arrived back in Neerkol. They didn't even give him a bed. They didn't even give him a blanket. He ended up sleeping in an old shed on potato sacks. And then they thought, what are we going to do with him? So they told him he was going to a farm. Where they sent him was Westbrook, a place of brutality and inhumanity and cruelty, a punishment place. Yeah. But it wasn't long after Bryan was there, terrible things happened to him when he was there, as it did for every boy who was in there. But things got so bad that they staged 2 mass breakouts. And that's how Bryan ended up in jail, was escaping from a place of torture. But this is their escape. So they've escaped from Westbrook and Bryan is running down the street. In the early hours of the morning, we come across a farm, decide we're going to get a car. We've had enough walking. We found a blue Zapper utility with the keys in it. So we reversed it out. All 4 of us crammed into the front and headed towards Toowoomba. We ended up going through Toowoomba, where the police must have seen it, because then it was on. The police chased us, siren blaring, and we drove down the range towards Brisbane. We were yelling, screaming as we hurtled down those steep, narrow bends. I thought we were going to fall off the side of the road and crash for sure. My heart was hammering in my throat. On the flat, the police roared up beside us and told us to pull over. One of the cops had his gun in his hand. But we just sped up and got in front of them again. Somewhere near Pittsworth, we turned off. Going down the road there, the police right on our tail. Our driver said he was going to slam on the brakes and for us to all jump out and make a run for it. When we stopped, the police hit the back of the ute, just enough to jolt us. We jumped out. Don't know where the driver went. We found out later he went to the right. 3 of us went to the left, and by that time the police had got out of their car. We were in a cornfield, but the corn had been picked, so there wasn't much to hide in. Only a few dead stalks ready to fall. Stop, stop, or I'll shoot, one of the policemen called. We were only about 80 metres away when he started shooting. Ping, ping, ping. The dead brown corn stalks crackled and snapped as the bullet shot through them. At least 5 shots were fired at us. They turned on the spotlight, searching for us across the cornfield, sweeping in beams, but they couldn't see anything because we were lying flat on our stomachs, breathing hard, terrified we were going to be shot.
Gee, not a lot's changed with me. People can you report out today that listening to TV. I'm gonna just open this up to our panel for now, but if you've got any questions, please keep them because we're gonna come to questions in just a few minutes actually. The treatment of forgotten Australian people as children. I mean, we've put an idea of how to live their lives, what about their whole lives, and you know, what is available to people when they're living with that kind of trauma. I know you're part of that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what, as adults, people have really taught us, and they've taught everyone that trauma isn't something you fix, and it isn't something that comes and goes, that every aspect of anyone's life and the transitions in life, like to aged care, is that it's revisited or it has a different face. And you know, for many people aging now, with the National Roundtable just won an award for the advocacy of forgotten Australians. Some people hate the term forgotten Australians, so just in case anyone's here, it was the name of the report, and some people feel that whilst it is a great identity for some people, other people feel they don't like it. They want to be referred to as out of home care survivors, or people who experience abuse in institutions. There's a whole range of ways that people want to be described, but the issue of ageing is obviously the issue that is most current for the generation that have been through all these reports and apologies, and they've really, I think, amplified the experience that when you have to go into care, once again, you could be confronted with the abuse of power. And that's a very terrifying thing. And I think it's important that we differentiate trauma from abuse of power, because the two are related, but so often we can just put the trauma as something the individual experiences and forget to really focus on the power that everybody has, and particularly the power people have in professions of care, like aged care. I mean, the stats are terrible. The Aged Care Royal Commission revealed significant abuses in the same way that the institutions looked at children. So I think that issue of that it's something that doesn't get fixed and therefore you go through a service and you're right, that's never going to be the case. There needs to be holding places for people and places that people can reconnect with as they go through different stages of their life. But I think you'd never ever really sever the harm that's done by not protecting children with their mothers and not believing in motherhood, really. That's why institutions are created and were created. The church was seen to have this vision of, looking after the orphans at the cost of caring for and having people know their mothers and their fathers, but not all fathers were in the lives of the mothers either. So, but I think that we still have a child protection system that does that now. And when you look at the rates of Indigenous children and the rates of people who are poor, who have, adversity in their life, that they are up against this incredible abuse of power that can occur that is doing more harm than good. And we need to keep remembering what the past has, what you all have told us, because it can still happen today if we don't. You have to watch for the corners last week. the abuse of power in the name of our social and legal and economic policies is something we all need to pay attention to and not let it go.
Children belong with their mothers.
Well,
Most of the
we
time
could be
that's-
supporting others much more than we do. And we could be investing in different ways of looking after children, but we don't even get there. Like, even the discussion for that to occur is often fraught with, but someone might die. Well, people are dying anyway.
I'm gonna put your questions, so, think, have a think about what you want to ask, but just one more thing in terms of the affected trauma. In childhood, like traumatic childhood abuse and how it cascades to the next generation. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I think we need to be careful how we talk about this. A lot of forgotten children have been very worried that because they were in care and have talked about their experience, that then they're going to be seen as being abusive to their children, when in fact many were very protective. So of course trauma has an intergenerational effect, but you've got to understand the things that mitigate that too. And we never pay attention to the courage, the resilience and the just determination of people to mitigate the effects of that trauma.
Okay, I was talking more about the effects of trauma. Not the
Yeah.
people being.
No, it is the effects though. But even when we talk about the effects, people can feel that then they're going to be blamed
Yeah.
for their children experiencing something that isn't good. So I think that we just have to be careful. We have to acknowledge it. It's real and it's there. But you also have to not acknowledge what efforts the mother or father or other people have put into making sure they did the best job they could and making sure they were protecting children and doing the best they could do, because that often isn't paid attention to. Like, it's only half the story we hear about.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're not terribly good as a country at supporting families.
I told the lady rotten system. I printed out. I said, then you money will have a come near my bank. And she used it then. Never did. Son. Boy, if I really think. Anyway. Said you're always a hard bastard. But at the same time, we're always paid. And we're still as thick as thieves to this very day. I don't blame the nuns in Neerkol. They were only doing as they were told. They were under resourced, and the rotten system knew that they were under resourced, that they didn't pay the price. We did. I'm not going to let them forget it.
Big questions.
I must say that even still today, our children, most of our children are blaming us for everything. And it's still not over because we've got to deal with the children now, our children, and that needs to be looked at, Karen, if you can think about it.
Yeah. There must be another question in the audience. Now's your chance. It's very good.
Yeah, can I see it when it's all done?
I can't do any more books.
One more left.
Well, Lana, I think that we have to keep educating your children, everybody, about that it's not your responsibility to tell everyone what you lived through. That it was, it was a product of society. It was a product of our leadership. And I've met many parents, many adult children of forgotten Australians over the years who had no idea. I remember one family came and we gave them the inquiry to read, and they had no idea that Westbrook wasn't a dairy farm, but because their parent had told them that it was a dairy farm and that he grew up on a dairy farm because, I mean, parents want to protect their children. And I think we don't give enough credit to that. And so I think that, you know, what you call for all the time about educating everyone to what was a reality in Australia, that it's on public record, it's all there for people to read and learn about, and that it's not something that's your individual responsibility.
Thank you. I just. Question.
Oh.
How can we get involved if we want to help and do something to support the work that you guys are doing? How can we get involved? What ways are we?
So we have a volunteer program at Lotus Place Micro Projects. So if you're interested in supporting the work that we do, there's different areas that you can volunteer. There's always people can donate to Micah as well to support the work we do. But volunteering, I think, is a direct way that you can give, and that's, I mean, that's how Adrena actually started, because she volunteered at the time, but how many years? Probably at least a couple of years. But it's about how much, and the different people have different things to offer, and I think yourself, you volunteered your skills and experience as well. So I mean, I think it's this volunteering. Give us a call.
So, lady, will you sit still and I can catch you? There's a national body. Not that I'm putting micro projects all over the place down in any way, shape, or form. But we do have a national body called the Alliance for Forgotten Australians. We're just starting to get our mojo.
They contributed to this book as well.
Can I have a couple of untold stories about Bryan? One of the beautiful things about Bryan was he always had an open neck shirt. If you look at all the photos, his shirt's always open. At one stage, I used to work at Lotus, and at one stage, as part of a creative
You didn't have
project,
long hair then.
Bryan made me a tie. And one of my, I do photography, so I have a digital biography. One of my most treasured photographs is Bryan standing next to me, and I'm wearing this bright green tie that Bryan made for me. But the other story, and I'd like to hear from the panel, we don't often talk about the spirituality. People like Bryan have lived through the most abusive forms of religious structures. One of the most amazing conversations Bryan and I had. He asked me to go out. This might be related to his memories of his mother. He asked me to go and give him a picture of Mary McKillop. And now this is the interesting bit. He hung it in the toilet. No, but the thing is, if you know much about trauma, it can have a physical effect on people. And the time in the toilet was an incredibly calming one. And he would tell me, he would look up at Mary McKillop. And I really wonder what that helped with his mother. I don't know. And it came from the panel, the question of, spirituality beyond that abuse in spiritual institutions. What's been your experience working with people on that?
Well, everyone's different. But I think people have been on a journey. They're like everyone, religion isn't spirituality. They've found that. I think religion was a structure for a lot of people though. And they may still find Christian faith something that they engage with, but I think they see it very differently to the religion that they had in the institution. But I know when we did the process of naming what to name the peer centre, the stories of spirituality were amazing that people wrote in, and over, I think it was over 60%, wasn't it, Joe? were very much about Buddhist symbols or the lotus flower itself was one of the, from people who hadn't talked to each other, that they had found the meaning of that metaphor as something that they somehow found, you know, out of the muddy waters came beauty with the white flower and all the pink. But people found that metaphor much better than Christmas.
And you know what? You know what I feel? I feel that a lot of us have been in institutions, have been abused, right? We get along with one another because we've been in that experience. So when we're talking to other people who have been in the same situations, we understand one another. And we have that depth of a relationship. Understood? Yes. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, very much. I think what I've seen, and sometimes it's surprised me that people still do have faith and in a high power, and even some people still are part of religions, and given what they've been through, it has surprised me at times. But I think there's a lot of support that people can get from religious communities and connecting with others. And I think that's really important for someone that's been isolated and separated from community and had community dislocation as part of their childhood trauma, to be welcomed into a community of any kind. So I think that's very important, and it's not something that we focus on directly at Lotus Place, but each person, like Karen said, has their own experience and their own way of connecting with the deep part of themselves and connecting with power greater than themselves. And I think religion sometimes helps fulfill that, and sometimes it's through Lotus Place and through connecting with other communities that people have that experience.
And really, I'd like to say the support we get from all of you people who are helping us. You know, Karen, yourself, Katie, Joe, we all miss Joe, everyone, you know, everyone on the staff. We all feel that you're understanding us and you are supporting us. And that makes us feel better in ourselves. That somebody in authority is helping us and not ridiculing us for what we have been through. And we can't do without you guys, Aaron and Katie, and all of us. Fantastic. Yeah. We need you guys, thank all of you. So helpful and supportive. We need that support. Yes. Yes. Oh.
We were the interview. So here's Bryan, back when he was young and healthy. Right.
Can we turn the line?
Oh, we need to?
Well, maybe it's not on anymore.
No, it's not. Oh,
I think that's the thing, except for moving that.
okay.
So.
It's been lights on there. Don't get lights.
Oh, yeah, it's the line. Okay. I need
She's dead now, but my partner was quite capable of writing the book. And she was the one that done all the documentation I have is the thing that we went. Okay, that's fine. So she's quite capable of writing the book. Never eventuated. The partner was better, mate, and we just go those words into where they've got to go. Like, I just need someone to express it to open up more, dragging them around. Yeah, you can't just say something and cut it short because it just doesn't work that way. Don't keep waiting, you've got to move forward. I mean, by hanging around, you know, you're waiting for this money. And that's why I'm trying to push forward. I want to sort of push forward and try and get as soon as possible to get my book done, or the writing of it done, so then I can go further to get something finished. Otherwise, I'm getting older and older and older. And it may never get into my own life.
How long have you been thinking about this?
I've been years, I don't know, I'd say 20 years or something like that, time fast. Right now, I'm going to one, and they can only do a certain amount of woman, and then she had to withdraw. Yeah, that's the funny way I got that, it's understood, yeah, there's so much in it, but to explain about my family, my life, my relationships, jail, Westbrook, Neerkol, the way I lived my life, I sleeping in the grass there, you know, and using bow and big little stick in my one little life, and this bag, and this one, for years. The farmers make money, and she might buy one company. And then, it's going to get it. Yeah, I wouldn't even walk on the sides of the road, so it's the bush there and the super trap. And I just lived like that. Farmers wanted to make what I was doing. And I was saying, so I picked it up. And they do the fence and digging holes in it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go through those guys and hit them.
Isn't that gorgeous? We're just about done, but before we upload.
What we cut out at the end of that, he said, what are we going to use this for anyway?
With this, exactly with this. I think we all want to thank you all for coming, especially Bryan's family has been very special. Before we all move out though, we've got one more thing, and Dave and Randall have got a special song to close the evening. Dedicated to Bryan and all forgotten strength.
Like to mention Cheryl as well. I don't think this book would have happened without her, and Michael also really looking after Dad in these last few years, enabling him to stay at home so that we could get the book finally issued. Cheryl and Michael, thank you.
The thing that struck me most about Lauren was he was like a gentleman. He was not right, he was a gentleman. He was good. She breathes, how sweet the sound, the sea, the breeze, oh, so smart. Was green, the torn, more to fear, and breathe, the fear really
You go first.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thanks to all of you for coming tonight. I think Bryan would have been smiling away and listening to all these stories. They were all fantastic to hear. And do you want to say anything before we sign off? Except, of course, buy the book. Books that's out of the counter. You get your preview with it. And I can personally enjoy it. It's a really, really wonderful read. Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, everybody. And a big round of applause for Edwina, Katie, Chris, our whole panel, and of course that amazing, beautiful song from Randall and Dave as well. So the scores are for about 20 more minutes, so please go and grab something to eat and go to the bar. And yes, as Chris said, please buy the book. We love it. Thanks again, everybody.